Michael R. Brown is a teacher, poet, and traveling man who has been described as the Jerry Garcia of performance poetry. Brown has been teaching for 39 years, currently as professor of communications at Mount Ida College. He has 3 collections of poetry: The Man Who Makes Amusement Rides, Susquehanna, and Falling Walendas, and numerous other publications and honors. He founded SLAM, the International Performance Poetry Newsletter, and he has several times performed his poem Chorus as part of Beat Cafe, an original ballet choreographed by former Joffrey Ballet dancer Anthony Williams. He recently completed a play, The Duchess of York, and appeared in the documentary film Slam Nation.
Father strutted ghost-like on the broad ramparts of his life. His greatest truths lurked in dark corners. The more he thought he knew what was around, the more realities scurried along the edges, quick, furtive things he could only guess at. In his last days, my father saw farmers move in weird dances where only corn shocks stood. He dodged imaginary slaps and cars that never came down the street. He talked to people across the room as if they came from different worlds. I walk into the VA hospital every Monday and stare my future in the face. Ashy old men shuffle past in frayed plaid robes, cigarettes burning down to yellow knuckles. They mumble meaningless conversations with absent passers-by in vacant hallways. Someday, I'm going to be a shambling phantom in an unfurnished future. I fear the loss of fire. But the nurses tell me that drug and alcohol, these men never felt the rage to dare life's tightropes. Still, I get an attitude about the broad daylight truths that scare us into doing right, while the tough, rat-like facts of life gnaw away at the foundations, pick at the threads on the frayed plaid robes until we stand naked in front of our graves wondering, how did we come to this? My doctor tells me that the new hitch in my heartbeat is inexplicable, but it disturbs my sleep and it's connected to that slight cough when I'm tired. Not to be confused with the old hitch in my heartbeat from most of the 70s spent on speed, or that other slight cough from 30 years of pipe smoking and fat cigars. My father echoed his father. It's not the growing old that bothers me, it's the falling apart that goes with it. They both broke down like old factories. Their machinery was chalked and shimmed to tolerances no caulking could pad. Their dynamos went eccentric, powering down, and their very foundations were shattered by vibration. Dust and gunk clogged the sump pumps and the ventilators till their tattered roofs collapsed, their doors flapped in least wind, and they were defenseless against the rain. This is not a sympathy plea. You will understand that when it happens to you. I only come out on days when I feel all right. I stay home when my lungs feel like wet sponges, my blood like oatmeal, my head like the clouds east of some industrial town. On days like that, it's enough to make a man scrape together transit fare and step in front of the train. But the tough old guys go for the good days as long as they can, even though they may see the world through weepy eyes, resent their limbs for their fundamental, unyielding awkwardness, hate their teeth because they will outlast them. There's no shame in growing old, but don't you young people try to tell us how hard life is. We may hear a certain world weariness in your voices, but we feel it deep in our bones. This weak-chested wheeze that powers the fever up my face and into my head is like a dry wood boiler generating steam, propelling me through month-long thickets of experience, whirring by in cacophonies of rich fall colors strewn on plush turf. Brilliant sun-fix crown my head like a torturer's hat, blinded without, blinding within, shattering my vision so that each step bumps the dark tunnel's end of the kaleidoscope, which is my sight. The taste of leaves and smoke. The smell of smoke dilates my nostrils. The warm air flumes and mixes dead wood and dry grass, dirt and onion leaves, broad leathery base of pine, fish on sea air into a great autumnal chowder boiling inside my head above the hearth fire in my chest. My sturdy legs squat on the stone floor, my stumpy arms hooked for hanging things, my crazed consciousness a woodsman's cookbook, and my sad, congested heart singing like a stone at the center of the cauldron. For all of the majestic chords of nature's symphony gathered in my perceptual madness and broadcast in my raving awareness, for all that I might care to be or cured, I gather myself in quiet writing, while my senses are dragged behind fall's runaway cart, and I wish I declare if I were half my age and twice as mad as all of the music played at once, I would be you, John Keats. I would be you. Now thank you. That last one was written after I walked out of a classroom at the University of Rhode Island on a fall day, so I understand that window, looking out that window thing. As Ellen mentioned, and I will do this public service and commercial announcement right now, I have 3 books of poetry. Falling Walendas, which is the pieces I just did, are in Falling Walendas, which is the first book, which is based on a performance piece that I did in the early 90s. Susquehanna, which is almost all persona poems or person-type poems based on the communities that I lived in on the lower Susquehanna when I was growing up. And The Man Who Makes Amusement Rides, which is winner of the 2004 Cambridge Poetry Award. This was also a finalist, so only one of them could win. I wanted to do one tonight here particularly because part of it was, I don't want to say inspired, but Princeton, the community, was partly responsible for part of this poem. I can't do that anymore, can I? The poem is about an affinity I have always had for garbage men. When I was growing up, the favorite person in my community to hang out with was Mr. Willie, the garbage man. He was a grand old guy. He had a huge collection of automatic banks, where you put a coin in and they do something. He was just a great guy. And then when I was living in Chicago, one of my favorite people to hang out at a bar was a guy who wrote for Second City and who went under the name of John the Garbage Man. He had a little silver ring with a little step tab on it, and when the ring with the top of the garbage can opened up, there was a diamond inside. So these are more than your average interesting people. But the part that has to do with Princeton is the falling down sick on the kitchen floor, which we'll get to. The brown grocery sack in the wastebasket smells like spoiled poultry. Garbage is my business. I drool over the burst bag on kitchen tile, a background of coffee grounds, shiny chicken bones, egg shells, large outer leaves of lettuce with edges turning liquid brown, the sunny breast of a grapefruit half, crisp chicken skin, a marmalade jar, cigar butts, breadcrumbs, tuna tins. Sometimes I carry out a dry sack full of waxed cartons. Fish heads, carrot tops, potato peels are rare these days among squeaky styrofoam, and death's rattle in the aluminum trays. Living with my sons, I thought a major task of family life was manufacturing garbage. A child walked in unconscious beauty out a door, candy in hand, and behind him rose a mountain of milk cartons, hot dog packages, sweet tart packets, saran wrap, Fruit Loop boxes, threatening to fall and sweep him across the playroom floor. I'd run to the rescue with black plastic bags and tote a load to the garage. I learned from the two garbage men in my hometown, as we all did in those days. Mr. Willie picked out treasures, then dumped the rest where the nearest street ended above the Susquehanna. Two Belt Smitty saved ancient artifacts and had a yard full of useful things that nobody wanted. The street ends of my childhood were flat tops of trash piles, tin cans, papers, tires, old clothes, whatever smelled too bad to keep near the house. The river was a dump, foiled by upstate anthracite matching mill-smoked grit in our small-town twilight. Flood time forced rats up, and we shot them, our bloodlust blinding our awareness of the shifting, leavening, agglutinizing things of life: shells, husks, letters, bones, rotten vegetables, and skin. Some intellectuals might say this isn't fit conversation, just my own trash bagged and set on some editor's desk. But most intellectuals are so fucking stupid. They never overlook anything except the obvious. Take two in deep conversation at a cafe table. Drop a couple of fish heads among the coffee cups. They chatter on because they can't fit those foul-smelling chili stares into their lives. Like doctors who medicate from across the room, afraid they'll get sick if they find infection they can't see, their patients holding in pain until they can't go on, lying down under surgeons' knives, logical dividers that section their pain. In the end, we're all garbage anyway. Bloated sacks bursting on tile floors, brown pools edging from under us, eggshell eye whites yellow at the edges, noses running mucus into the weave of our clothes, as though it doesn't matter as long as somebody else takes care of where the garbage goes. We've managed most of the public mess, cleaned up streams, vacant lots, air, and dumps, but most control just takes the smell and color out. We hide the stuff in vinyl-lined mounds, yet walk around paper bags, bottles on city streets, and dumpster shelves, and we still haven't learned to recycle ourselves. We must have garbage, so let it be rank. What we smell will rot. We must promise not to let our trash outlast us. I'm not against saving for the ages, but we shouldn't let things lie around after they're dead, then coffin and classify them beyond anyone's caring. Eat it now or throw it out. I'll clean up what you leave. There's some nice connections after you do this stuff for a while. I was hoping that David Messinio would be here tonight. I gather you were here a month ago or so. You were reading 2 months ago. If you didn't see David Messinio, he's right there. See him. If you have seen him, I hope you enjoyed his reading. I love this man. His magazine, Sensations Magazine, has published more of my poems than any other magazine. I love him. And of course, this is as Ellen said, we have a good, strong connection from the early days. We met in a query through the internet. Did I know someone who could help run a slam here? I cited a few of my credentials and said, well, if I will do, I could do that. As I said, all the characters, all the poems, or almost virtually all the poems in this book are built on particular characters in this town. This is called The Vagrant. I look back in my life and see vast stretches of dry brown sand marked by charred stumps of bridges I have burned, nubs worn to less each year. I see my sons, still children in my dreams, could recognize them among millions and have no idea who they are. This tough stone brain has put off reverie beyond reprieve. Nothing matters about any of it in all that I am now. Patient parents watch for prodigal sons, but it's a heavy curse for faithful children to wait on a vagrant old man. I am known in the cities of the world and only trace with my eye beyond where scratchy paths are erased by dust. All my families are not mine. All my children belong to someone else. I will go on. I have always done so. I do it well. But only the greedy or foolish let me approach a bridge. When I arrive at a shore, people know I seek conveyance. The world has been worn round by men like me. And what do we got here? My grandfather, we never referred to the river as the Susquehanna when I was growing up. My grandfather had a boathouse on the York County side of the Susquehanna. And so for me as a kid, it was always his river. It was Grandpa Dutch's river. And, I'm very happy to have been able to dedicate this book to his eldest daughter, my mother. He was gone by the time it came along, but he was a memorable guy. And so this is the man who owned the Susquehanna. Not just laws, the vote, the country, but trees, fish, and rivers belong to us. We do better when we live with what we do. But when a lot of people come, we must reckon with wives who want more and men who want it all. Chewing tobacco, pinups, beer, my bad habits rebuke progress. Kids call it my river because they think I know things nobody else does. Farming, I studied rocks and dirt. Railroads and coal companies schooled me. Peach Bottom and 3 Mile Island are just big hydro. The river teaches faster. I never get lost in the dark. Never get over how bright water can suddenly split and swallow a child. Places need watching, learning from, caring for. Men who build dams only see Sunday picnic grounds as PR. They never see flocks of ducks before sunup in October. Hear ice moan on winter nights. Feel the weight of a corpse in their arms. Reminders, we can't do all we think we can. And there's I should try to do something a little lighter here. Huh? Hey, how about that? Oh, here's the optometrist. I don't mean glasses. He had 4 eyes. But he only opened 2 of them at once, so nobody ever noticed. They were close together, one set above the other, and he was a good guy with a soft, quiet style. People didn't pay much attention to him, and he died young anyway. I think Doc Haldeman always knew. His parents must have, but it was so subtle. And the car wreck messed him up so bad, maybe even the undertaker didn't catch it. It's like the whole bunch of us. We all know almost everything, but no one of us knows that much. Oh, maybe a few. The doctors know most of the physical stuff. And the nurses, oh, the nurses, they're the witches. Nothing sees the light of day they don't know about. But we keep it quiet. Everybody has a chance to fit in. Isn't that the way the world ought to be? I'm not talking about those fairly commonplace things like 6 toes or that school teacher with 3 breasts. I mean, the kids catch on to that. And our memory of the river abides. Well, what floated on it fades, but you could fill a freak show with the things I've seen in this town. Some of the more normal ones, like May's Inn, all 500 pounds of her laid up with a broken hip, she would have been a minor attraction. The kid with the long, hairy tail, fairly embarrassing. But think of the man who could disappear. Stood right next to you 1 minute out of nowhere, talked for a while, then not a step in either direction, but gone. Only cigarette smoke hanging in the air. Odd-shaped young girl lived on Union Street, could open her skin and show whatever was underneath. Muscles on her arm, how her knee worked, all her innards cooking along. And the guy who lived by the river, gills behind his ears, could swim to York County underwater. The garbage men put everything somewhere. After a scrap metal haul, they'd plank for a couple of days. Me? Oh, nothing peculiar, except I see real good. Doc Haldeman noticed that right away. What do I want to do? Oh, The man who makes amusement writes, I'm going to do a New Jersey poem. When I die, bury me low, where I can hear the petroleum flow. You know that song? Roberts and Barron? Yeah, okay. It's funny, these connections that happen with poetry. This poem was written years ago about Reed's Beach, which is down on the Delaware Bay side of South Jersey, where the horseshoe crabs come in the spring tides and lay their eggs. And it's a huge thing. It's quite a sight if you want to have a look at what life was like, a couple of million years ago. Because what happens is there's a remarkable timing that takes place. The birds that migrate from the Arctic to the Antarctic to have summer all the time pass through there right at the time when the eggs are being laid, and so they come in and they feed on the eggs, which gives them enough energy to get back to where they need to go. And so this is a New Jersey poem, Reed's Beach. And now I find myself going to Block Island because the woman who published the book read this at a workshop on Block Island, and one of the lines in the poem struck the woman who owns the Block Island Poetry Project, and I'm going to be going there for workshops. It's weird how these things happen. But it also is appropriate for the line. Small waves splash brilliant foam in the spring sun as new moon tides put the male horseshoe crab to the water's edge. His green carapace awash, he waits for the female to follow. A wary submariner pursuing a single evolutionary track out of primordial ocean, she comes on unhurried, relentless, balancing tide, light, and growing life inside. He clasps her back with tiny claws just for that. In an ecstasy of eons, she scratches a shallow pit, disgorges her eggs. He fertilizes. The two cover them with sand and make a slow return to the dark water of Delaware Bay. This prehistorically sexy display takes place beneath a feathered quilt of ruddy turnstones, sanderlings, gulls, and sandpipers. Their breasts afire, eyes dark, heads flecked with gold, long-beaked red knots hop over spiny tails and gorge themselves on Ordovichian caviar, fuel to finish their flight from Tierra del Fuego to Arctic tundra, scrambling after endless summer in one long rush. The intersection doesn't care how long the road is. The crab's annual return to this margin says more than can be measured about surviving this planet's cataclysms. The global traveler's feeding stops at dusk. Huge flocks lift off in the dark, land next day among spring lichens and icy pools, do their mating dance, and chant the Arctic fox because they have no further choice. Time is too short for crabs or birds to have memory for aught but here. This tiny intersection on the backside of New Jersey, where millions have laid trillions to gain thousands, may seem a bad bet to those who shun the ocean and casinos for a day. But whatever we have seen or left won't multiply in this planet's pocket, won't last beyond a tide's half-life, and will never be as completely out of reach as those who gambled today on Reed's Beach. In my earliest memories, my mother's wash stick rattled up my back while I twisted in her other hand held high. We settled how her bike stalled, and she found me soundless, my ankle mangled in the spokes. But when she's finally gone, it's her last heroic days I'm going to remember. Stumbling on a tumor is discovering a fissioning mass of disorderly cells. We deploy the masters of war, train every weapon on a target, send painful patrols to bayonet the bad cells. She had a stroke on the table, and like a good gunnery crew, they held her in place and kept her pumping. But she had to sell the house, and she sat through the auction, her silver hair a halo, her hawk-like eyes bright, the entire household turned inside out for anyone to examine. 3 grandsons held up pieces of her productive life until the auctioneer got his price. The surgeons had prepared her for all of that. And then she chose charity bingo in a train station, living in a sea of blue and white, eyeglasses reflecting refectory light, and talking about all children as though they were 7 years old, shuffling on tough gray carpet past vague oil paintings in pinks and yellows through a wide doorway into a tiled room with a broad window above an empty parking lot. Her beige cell was an echo chamber for a television set aimed at a padded chair set diagonally in a far corner. The second tumor was a bullet wound. She fought death for an organ, while terror and loneliness carved their faces into withering bone, and then went to live with my brother so as not to die in fields of stone. And she endures the small indignities like the lift and wipe off the booster toilet seat. When I hold her up, she puts her arms around my neck, and I tell her we're dancing. I remember her teaching second graders eye to eye, her athletic grace on the basketball court, water skis, the golf course, and now we're doing a spastic dance in a short, dark hall with only a lighted door at the end. When all of the televisions are unlistenable and the phone no longer rings, only two sounds matter: breathing and someone calling her name. That would be me. In great dark caverns of depressed night, when angry work and daylight demands had been put to bed, I soloed in writing, while molten trumpet melodies of miles wove like satin snakes through iron slats of escapes from cold domestic fires. The desert of the American West holds scrub and sage, spiders and scorpions, snakes and cactus. Punch a hole in that till you're down to the rock where nothing grows. Put a man in there. If he can hear the voice of one other instrument play the songs he sings to himself, that man can learn to sing himself out of the devil's canyon, can come to believe in angels, greater possibilities than he ever imagined for himself. Sword wielder, horn blower, text maker, the defiant sun at home in the flames. All shoulds vanished in Bob Cascades. The way up was not the end of life. Only my spirit lifted on the updraft. Better as it brightened, faster as it succeeded, stronger as I ignored ordinary sound and sense. When I strode off a barren plain into a great city, my gait had no regular pace. Traffic's crashing tempo, the scrambled sensibility of whiskey lights, the crazed logic of work, all made sense to me because his horn had schooled me in their ways. When I sniffed watery vapor and street grit, the dusky aromas of sumac and brick, the million musks of metropolis mangled in red lights, Miles fit perfectly. His horn had hung in me, a great cat's cradle that strung together my eyes and feet, my heart and balls, my ears and gut. This was my instrument, given to me for all of the horns I could not play. My brain fused all of those disharmonies into words. Words that ran across sidewalks, climbed rough walls, flew in the sooty air, the snap of their beaks, the sound of gunshots, their cries, the songs of homeless souls, the flapping of their wings, nothing more than the joy of one inky scrawl after another, scratched across an immense and meaningless sky. He left me so many songs I have yet to play on this crazy harp inside the twisted frame of myself. Songs that lift me so high, I doubt I can stay. But I have this legacy from the archangel of jazz, ascended to his righteous estate. It may still be night, but it's never too late. Thank you very much.
I'm just going to do one short poem from Cool Women, Volume 1. And I thank you for being at Cool Girls earlier tonight. I don't know your name, but I know you were. You were at Cool Girls earlier. We had the joy of hearing the girls we've been mentoring give their first public reading tonight at the Y. It was really worth everything. Solstice Rituals. The fox began it, that long-legged adolescent who appeared to my song in the time of beach plums and first frosts. But now it is snowing, and the ruddy one curves, half cat, half pup, about my calves to tug me to the cave. Its floors fur-lined, warmth like flames reflecting on his pelt, those snappy eyes, the glistening nose. His long, lush tail curls across my eyes as I recline, unclothed, to puzzle at the rustle of arrival. I kneel, then sit back on my heels, to face you as the gods have always planned. The fox twines round your hips, stares with sweet command into my startled gaze.
This is sort of a panoramic view of the female values from the primitive felines through the 19th century working and genteel conditions to the present time. Bad Walter on the advertised female takeover. You speak of Tabby's soft patches, and not of Tabby's mean streak. She prowls backyards and bushes, pounces on field mice and squirrels. Off guard under the bird feeder, she goes for the throat, a terrible silence, a broken neck, a limp body hanging from her mouth. She walks daintily into the bushes, her domesticated mouth tears at raw squirrel. Can she be happy? She's somebody's pet. Working girls cramp up over sewing machines cut to one pattern by the crimping shears of commerce. Victorian ladies grip the arms of parlor chairs with the soft, nailless fingers of declawed kittens. But now, girls, beautiful bodies, make poetry of basketball. All boys kick dirt at second base, spitting and yelling. The world of the woman is a microcosm, a dream of frictionless functioning. Nothing disturbs. Where raising children is the whole game. Where men are kept for heavy lifting, awkwardly domesticated into a female scheme of work and play and safety zones, whose green streets men will prowl, displaying mean streaks. Thank you.
And that was my husband, the poet. I always say I'm not a poet, and I really believe that. However, I did write something, and I call it a poem. It's called Perfume. Ah, perfume, perfume, perfume. Has no size, has no color. She puts it on. He puts it on. And it fits. It fits. It always fits. Thank you.
Your generation. Children, in your generation, children were superfluous, expected to take care of themselves. A woman was condemned to live down her mistakes. In your youth, you walked with friends, talking and laughing on country roads, singing for a drink of water, the houses of neighbors far apart. Somewhere that was lost, 2 babies in 2 years, a marriage broken, moving to the city for work enough to live. There was the time
Your father gave you such a look. You tripped into a patch of thorns. Your life scarred and rusty from that day. There were no warning signs, no handbook or instructions, only someone with a mean look that cursed you when you fell. Thank you.
This is actually just a free writing that I did waking up from a dream that had some interesting things that painted in my mind. So it's called Hiding in My Tree. Day breaks, morning takes the energy of me and rushes within the outer skins of my entity, over the hills and through woods of green nocturnal skies. I find you hiding in my damn tree, to my surprise. And you are naked and unassured, but I dreamt us naked by the shore, where waves break and tiptoe to tickle toes, cool calves, and pulse our pulses, all the while looping over and under to string us up on invisible kite tails. They might melt away and we are standing upside down, hanging from clouds that rain, flashy purple, red, and fuchsia rays, and trip seagulls out, into thinking that the sand is nutritious to eat. And we laugh as we hang out as bats and practice echolocation and wonder if this magic will hold us long enough for revelation, or until the tick-tock telling tide. We know the fate of if it doesn't. We'll collide, head on, rolling down liquid steps, bowling into liquid hell, where crowns of sea anemones will latch onto our heads and throne us, the king and queen of seaweed. And we'll auditorily breathe, and our fingers will feed, for our mouths will be shown shut by the seahorses of servitude, shut with strands sliced from wished-on copper, flung by youthful hands of yesterday, now rusted like their once shiny offerings. Our toes will web and our flesh will slime, and we'll tell ocular tales with synchronous blinks and bats of lashes in time, down at the bottom of seaweed hell, if we miss the tidal time of today, while hanging from those mother clouds that spawn the purple, red, and fuchsia babes that discombobulate seagulls and hypnotize them to eat the sand. And we're still swaying, laughing, hand in hand in my dream where you are naked by the shore. But day broke, morning took, night stoked, and I find you are still hiding in my damn tree. Thanks.
I actually wrote this in response to the gang violence that is going on in Trenton. It's continuing to go on. Seems like every time
Slower and louder, please.
Slower and louder.
Yeah, okay.
I didn't even get started. It just seems that every time I turn on the news or read the newspaper, everything's the same except the ages of the children involved are younger and younger. So this is two birds with one stone. The response on the other line was a path to destruction. She slams down the phone in anger. What the hell do they know anyway? Damn psychic hotlines. The response on the other line was a path to destruction. The phone began to shake with fear as she anticipated the news that was to come. Little girl walks with her head down. Little boy walks with his head down, both kicking a stone around. Two birds with one stone. And across the street, there he was, a path to destruction, finishing the last of his 40-ounce. All day of inhaling poisons to the sound of car horn noises. Now, I can understand the need for family, but it's just sad. His relatives marked with stovetop hanger welts and tattoos. You see, colors be his only family tree, with a violent initiation fee. A lost young man, so many lost young men. A bad childhood, maybe from where it had stemmed, but deep down inside, I bet you they're all gems. But it's a hot summer day, and destruction is sweating beads of revenge. Now, Steele's stomach rumbles and is fed with clips. Support is called upon. 4 deep in the car, just as night falls, destruction looks up at the sky and sees a shooting star as he wishes upon the outcome of his own star shooting. Uzi and Glock barrel pointing a meteor shower. Targets standing oblivious on their porch that night, oblivious like last week's miscalculated victim of innocence and pigtails. Darkened headlights and creeping brake lights, The gory, deafening scene that ensued, I will spare you the dramatic details. But inside an adjacent kitchen, a phone falls to the ground. Are you still there, ma'am? Ma'am, are you still there? I didn't mean to upset you. You see, bullets stray streaking through airwaves that miss their targets must stop somewhere. This week's miscalculated victim, like last week's pigtails and innocence, she lays there bleeding to death, regretting ever making that phone call. She lays there bleeding to death, regretting ever staying on that line. They lay there bleeding to death, regretting ever making that phone call. They lay there bleeding to death, regretting ever staying on that line. 8 months down and just one to go. She only wanted to be a mother. So destruction. Let me ask you, are you proud of yourself now? Now that you've killed 2 birds with 1 stone? Are you any more of a man now that you've killed 2 birds with 1 stone? Thank you.
This poem takes place in California, in the High Sierra. It seems like the more beautiful a natural place is, the more people flock there, and subsequently the less beautiful it is. This is called In Yosemite Valley. In the morning, lug the cook stuff up above the black oak shade to the wall of white granite heat. Alligator lizards in the grass. Unpack and get the stove going. Down in the valley, cook fire smoke, tree spires, car doors and cook pans, children howling, more wonderful than coyotes. Hummingbird skims in and swipes off up the cliff. Coffee begins to boil. Scan the swoop of slope above. 1 chunk of cliff could give me a climber's death, rock and blood and bone. Spit out a mouthful of grounds. Sight binoculars across the valley smoke. Tenaya Canyon, not recommended for hiking due to hazardous conditions. Pour out another cup. A lizard skitters off, and grasshoppers go clack clack in the sun. Conversations drift up from the campground below, the sound of thousands waking. A tiny climber hangs on royal arches by a neon thread. Last night, she was a solitary light stuck up on the dark valley wall. 2 days and 1,800 vertical feet. A quiet place to sleep. Somebody's car alarm cuts through the morning air down there. Up here, hot black coffee, bright white sun.
Michael, thank you for your kind words from before. This poem is titled Christmas in America, 1540. It was a quiet snow, a ceaseless feather dusting that has buried me alive 10 nights in a row now. We huddle with horses for warmth. We don't light the fire for fear of a slaughter. We dreamed of gold and silver and glory, of rivers coursing with riches. In July, my general, Francisco Vasquez de Coronado, found Huica, first of the famed 7 cities of Cibola. The crowded, crumpled village contained 200 savages in houses 3-4 stories high, facing a central courtyard and a giant subterranean hall and a trap door, small hearth at center. We searched it all, even the twigs in the hearth. No gold. Now we dream of food and warmth and shelter. When the snow buries, it blocks the wild wind. Though it falls on our baggage, covers half a man's height, its weight does no damage. Should anyone come suddenly in night, all they'd see is snow, our army of 300 hidden below. I have heard rumors Francisco Vasquez intends to insist that the savages supply us with cloth. I think of those we met at the great rock of Acuco, who offered birds and provisions without our even asking. The general will give the order. The gentlemen will carry it out. These are no gentlemen. Like a gentle wind, like a sudden wind that turns gentle snow to blinding blizzard, I fear their order, Fear their words will whip the winds of change and turn upon us unfavorably. But tonight, there is peace on earth. We have gathered the junipers and pines, built a bona fide bonfire strong enough to melt snow 2 to 4 yards away. If I have counted right, this is the night of our Savior's birth. A low canopy of stars luminesces the snow, and I feel his presence tonight, amid this blazing juniper and pine, in this strange, goldless, yet glorious land. Thank you very much.
My name's Arlene Wiener. I'll read 2, I think, short poems. The first one is really inspired by Claude Lévi-Strauss, and it's called Tropical Wedding. The Bororos say, a woman wed a tapir. He could show her the wide world. He bedded her in the forest, grunting and rooting. It was wonderful. She visited her family at Thanksgiving. He'd gone hunting to be sure of getting his deer. When they saw their girl covered with ticks, her mother tried to pull off a fat one. Daughter turned away. That is one of my husband's pearls. Okay, and another kind of myth. In this I'm mythologizing my parents, but they really were very nice people. And actually, my mother is still a very nice person. The Magician's Daughter. In Inwood, near the Speedway where the projects are, a carnival would come when reeds grew green. The earliest illusion, the cup and ball, for a New York girl greener than reeds. He put me up her sleeve like a red silk scarf. For years I watched her wash out his high hat's lining, the feathers and blood.
Tonight, and I think we're back here January 22nd, maybe 19th. Harvey and Jane. It'll be announced. All right, thanks. Oh, Jane McKinley.